Jamaica. Make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out. Don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6:30.
All businesses, large and small, must have in place a sexual harassment policy by June 30 this year. That's according to the government. But are the big businesses ready? And how many of them are? And for those who aren't ready, how much more time do they need to get their houses in order? And what of the University of the West Indies? What do they have on paper to deal with an issue that has spawned several allegations, claim and counterclaim about happenings on the Mona campus? That's the issue I'll be tackling for you as your personal journalist here on Lead Story this evening. Right, so the government through the Minister of Gender Affairs led by Olivia Babsy-Grange has said that by June 30 this year, all businesses and any business you can think of that employs people, has people in their employ, must have a sexual harassment policy that they would have developed and must have that implemented by June 30 this year. Of course, the sexual harassment legislation, the Protection and Prevention Act, is in force, and the government wants this policy to be in place in every place of business to facilitate the act working to the true intent. I've assembled a small panel, but an August panel nonetheless. Dr. Karen Carpenter, she's the senior lecturer and head of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the University of the West Indies. She's here along with the gentleman Wayne Chen, who is the head of the Jamaica Employers Federation. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to Lead Story.
Good evening, George.
Good evening, Dr. Carpenter. How are you?
How are you, Wayne? Good to see you.
Very well, thank you. Good to see you. Mr. Davis.
Yes, I was waiting on you to tell me good evening. Nevertheless. All right, let's crack on. Dr. Carpenter, let me start with you. Of course, we would have seen that blaring front page headline in the Gleaner yesterday and be reminded of issues at the University of the West Indies, the Mona campus. Not new issues. If one just does a simple Google search, there'll come up several articles about sexual assault allegations and harassment on the University of the West Indies' Mona campus over time. You, in this position that you are, with a policy in tow, are you satisfied that the infrastructure exists on paper to lead the UWI out of these controversial times?
George, I think not only do they exist on paper, it's not just policy, but it's also practice. And the university has for a very long time had and maintained a disciplinary procedure. And we might appreciate that when matters come before a disciplinary procedure of any kind, a disciplinary panel, that those matters are confidential. So it's interesting to note that the press would like to discuss matters that are confidential or that are being adjudicated because it's not for public consumption.
Yeah. I hear you on that, but what the press would like, Dr. Carpenter, is, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this as a woman who has been close to the media over time, is a guide as to whether or not the matter is being treated with seriously. And part of the probing that the press does is just to get that simple indication from the powers that be handling matters concerning sexual harassment.
Certainly, I appreciate and I value that the press probe these matters and bring to the fore the things that are important, especially when it relates to legislation. These are not whims and these are not fancies and these are not optional. This is the law of the land. So it is important for the press to probe, shall I say, in a critical fashion. It is important to probe critically and to have enough information to ask the right questions.
When the Jamaica Employers Federation, I see you in the press saying, look, the smaller businesses need more time. The big businesses are okay. They have their policy intact, but your smaller members need more time. Why do they need more time?
The Act speaks to particular structures, designated officers. In principle, a certain amount of distance between the complainant and persons that complainant may report to, and so on and so forth. And the fact is that the vast majority of Jamaicans are employed in small and medium enterprises. The vast majority, and I will also add, many Jamaicans are working in the informal sector. I'm keeping my words very carefully. The fact is that many, I don't want to hazard a guess as to the percentage, small and medium-sized enterprises are just not up to speed on the principles and the implementation of the Sexual Harassment Act. And I want to make that point very clearly. It's not about punishment after the fact.
No.
It's about changing the workplace culture to one where one human being, and I'm not being gender specific, is seen as prey because of the poor relationship, because of the necessity for a job, the necessity for a recommendation, the necessity for a promotion. We want to make workplaces free of that type of harassment. And historically, it's been there. We have to be blunt as a nation. We have to be blunt as a nation that there are employers who see employees as prey. Supervisors see those that report to them as prey, as you know. It's been, and people go and they leave the premises and they go and drink and laugh about it. It needs a cultural shift in Jamaica. The laws support the punitive side. What we have not said enough is, where is the public education? Where is the public discussion? You talked about the role of the media, and I believe in a past life you were president of the association, the Press Association. It's something that I've spoken to association about. Too many of our media houses are caught up in the gotcha moment. They like the sensational headline, the after the fact, the salacious thing, and not enough about, let us have a discussion about making workplaces safe for people of both genders, recognizing that the majority of victims are women, but there are also men who are victims. There are same-sex harassment. It's important to note that the law is not gender specific. It just talks about harassment of a sexual nature.
Yeah, I'm trying to,
as a role to play.
Wayne, I'm trying to do my role here, play my own part. CVM is looking to do its own bit by doing its own share of the heavy lifting, by lifting the conversation above sleaze and sensationalism to talk about structure and policy. And so let me ask you this. Do I hear you saying that the requirement imposed on businesses, large and small, public and private sector, to have this sexual harassment policy in place by June 30, that whereas the larger institutions with their ample resources and their history of operating according to structure have a distinct advantage, and that your smaller members can't abide by the same rules set down for the bigger players? Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't say can't.
No, yeah.
No, I'm not saying can't. In terms of the degree of public awareness, we just have to be blunt. Many are just not aware. The fact is that the Jamaica Employers Federation has been, in our membership, I would dare say that we have a couple hundred, but there are thousands of enterprises out there who are not members of the JAF, and this is not a public appeal for more members, but it's just the reality. We have been working closely with the help of the International Labour Organization, at least since 2021, and perhaps even earlier because of the years. We have conducted many trainings and seminars, workshops, talks, but we talk to hundreds, we don't talk to thousands. So for the hundreds we talk to, and for those who may be paying attention to the different press releases in the media, those are fine, but we're preaching to the choir in a sense. And I'm talking the reality out there now of the thousands more who I don't think it has sunk in. They are concerned about making a profit, day-to-day survival of their business, and on and on. And I think we need a little bit more time to just have that last push around public awareness. The Employers Federation has resources. The resources need to get up to speed a little bit more over the next couple of weeks. But certainly we can put in place some online toolkits and so on, where we can pick out things applicable, some templates.
Yes.
So the first step, the policy in place is a nice thing, but you don't want it to just go into file 13 with everything else.
And that's the issue.
Along with the policy, we have to build that pragmatic way around making your workplace free of sexual harassment.
And that's the issue, because Dr. Carpenter, when I heard the minister speak about the deadline for the implementation of the policy, I said to myself, well, what are the chances that this policy just becomes something that you type, print, paste on a wall somewhere in an office and it has no effect? Because it's the same things that Wayne is speaking about, the challenges that the majority of businesses, which are small and smallish, will have to put in place what the government is demanding. I can't see how in many cases it will not be a piece of paper stuck somewhere and the real effect of it is not felt in the workplace. What say you on that?
Well, I think, George, like any other legislation, and much of what Wayne Chain has just shared is actually very, very relevant. He shared some very important practical and pragmatic issues that we face. But culture change is always a challenge. It is not just about following legislation, typing something and printing it. We have to change our mindsets about what constitutes a safe environment for workers of all sizes of businesses. So no, I certainly don't expect that we are not going to abide by the law, but it requires that public education. It requires that we examine what exactly is sexual harassment, because this is a peculiar piece of legislation. If you consider that the person making the claim is a person who determines whether or not they've been harassed, this is something that Jamaicans have not grappled with. Mm-hmm. You cannot decide that you've harassed someone. They have to decide, and the definition under the law is quite simple, quite easy, quite manageable, that this is unwelcome sexual attention. So for once, we have a law that resides with the complainant and their response to the attentions and behaviors and the 9 forms of sexual harassment. So we have to educate a population about making a complaint. We have to educate a population about what is proper workplace practice versus what is appropriate if you're flirting and you're both in a mutual relationship. And that certainly is one of the things that makes it stand out. If there's no mutuality of interest, then that constitutes harassment. It is unwelcome sexual advances of 9 different types. The law is very clear. I think this piece of legislation was well written and is easily adaptable for the average Jamaican. I'm happy to see legislation that people can read and understand for themselves.
Hear me on this, though. We have the late former Prime Minister Edward Seaga to thank for the phrase, "it takes cash to care." The principal of the UWI was in the media some time ago, Professor Denzel Williams, saying it will cost the UWI $14 million upfront to really give this policy the support it needs to be effective. That includes the payment of a sexual harassment coordinator. It takes a sizable chunk of that $14 million, I would imagine, plus other things. But if you scale it, how many entities are in a position to spend along the lines of the UWI to get their house in order? Isn't this a barrier to compliance?
No, George, I'm sorry. I don't think we should take the principal's very laudable commitment in terms of funding a secretariat. It's an entire secretariat that's being funded. It's not one post.
Yes.
But I don't think we should take that as a marker for what all businesses will need. The university is a very large institution with almost 4,000 workers. It's a very different kind of animal from the small bartender or shopkeeper or person on the ground who is doing products that they're going to deliver to a workplace. So as Wayne Chen has said, we have to think about it in terms of scale.
Yes.
We have small businesses, medium businesses, we have large businesses, we have international business and regional like ourselves, the university. We're a very different animal.
Yes.
The person who has a small shop with 5 workers. So I don't think we can just use that benchmark of our commitment of 14 million as a benchmark for every Jamaican.
It's, as you know very well, Dr. Carpenter, it's how equations work. You take a known and then you work your way to the unknowns. But there you go. Thank you for that response. We'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll pick up the discussion. We're talking about the sexual harassment policy. June 30 is fast approaching. You better believe it. Companies, large and small, must have one in place by then or else.
time by Grace. Taste that moves you is
6:45.
Valiant, Hitmaker, Aston Villa, star winger. Move out my way, me and Matsuma Day.
To be an artist, you feel it easy. Never easy.
The same thing there.
No, like friend them don't play the ball.
Friend of my baller.
So you don't play some ball with them?
I have 2 left foot then, sir.
When we are going to see you back in the national colours, Leon?
It's a question I'm going to answer to.
The Cut is brought to you by Flow and Guinness.
no more fear of missing out. CVM TV News is on YouTube. Get up-to-date news, sports, and business content at CVM TV News anytime, anywhere. Subscribe now to CVM TV News to see it happen.
It's what's being described as a groundbreaking piece of legislation, a game changer by the Minister of Gender Affairs, Olivia Babsy-Grange, the Sexual Harassment Prevention and Protection Act, which came into force. The policy to support the legislation must be in place in all workplaces, large and small, public and private sector, by June 30 this year. And the report from the Jamaica Employers Federation, which has hundreds of members, according to its president, Wayne Chen, doesn't represent nearly all of the companies in Jamaica operating as enterprises. He says his bigger players are ready. They have their ducks in a row, but the smaller ones are struggling to make the deadline, and he would like some more time. I also have senior lecturer and head of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the UWI Mona, Dr. Karen Carpenter, as well. Wayne Chen, if I may ask some practical questions about this sexual harassment policy, because I agree with you both, of course. It will require a cultural change to get the country to move in lockstep with what the legislation wishes to happen where relations in the workplace are concerned. And I ask you this: in a circumstance where a woman, let's say a woman alleges sexual harassment by an individual in the workplace, a superior, and the superior can say, well, why are you making this complaint against me when I apologized to you directly for my action? You appeared to accept the apology, but now that we are talking about sexual harassment legislation and the company now has a policy, you are going to file that complaint against me. How does that stack up in terms of the appearance of justice for all the parties involved in those circumstances, Wayne Chen?
I mentioned earlier that there has to be some distance between the tribunal, the panel, that will have to adjudicate cases such as this and weigh up all the circumstances. There's a fair amount of discretion even within the very clear guidelines of this law. If you read through the law itself, it's, as Dr. Carpenter said earlier, it's easy to read, it's very clear. It's aspirational in a way, because as I say, we are here now and we want to get there. But it's an important first step. Let's start with that. And this discussion is an important discussion. And it's important to know that many of the changes that take place in the wider society start in workplaces, you know.
Yes.
It's something that we don't, I think, sufficiently acknowledge, that when we come out of our homes, come out of our social gatherings, and we go into a workplace where you have to abide by certain rules, these rules in turn get back out and re-socialize the society. So I think it's important, and perhaps a bit of serendipity, that we have this discussion around the workplace where, you know, rules are tied to your economic circumstances, tied to a job. So there is some amount of sanction. And it's important too that the big employers, the big organizations recognize that workplace morale is one of the keys to business sustainability and success. When people go to work and are happy at work, they're more productive. There's a dollars and cents value attached to this, to creating a workplace where people feel comfortable. And it sometimes takes a little longer. And I'll flip it the other way. There are small businesses that are run just like that. They didn't need a law to say, look, we're going to run. I don't want us to feel that there's some sort of vast, wild west of small businesses out there. There are many small Jamaican businesses that are run in a very ethical and good way. I think our job as an employer's representative is to see that best practices are spread into all workplaces. And it's a bit of carrot and stick. We say, look, it's good business for your employees to be productive. Productivity is linked to morale. And then the stick, but it's not the law. So, we're not weaseling out of this one.
But,
we recognize too that in smaller enterprises in particular, the evidential burden of somebody making a complaint is going to be difficult.
Yes.
Oftentimes it's going to be my word against yours.
Yes.
So we recognize too that even as we do this amount of heavy lifting over here, there is a wider conversation that this should spark, which is let us talk about behavior changes.
Yes.
It's important too that the sexual harassment bill takes note of businesses, but it also takes note of institutions.
Yes.
It speaks of student to student,
Yes.
So I think that it's important that this discussion is taking place in schools.
So here,
we don't want to say high schools, all schools.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Dr. Carpenter, and Wayne is a scholar and a gentleman, but he gave me a swerve on the question. I have to ask this question. I have to ask this question, Dr. Carpenter, because I'm not talking about the chatterati on the social media platforms who just go to town on everything brainlessly. Sensible people ask the relevant question to say, women rightfully see this as an avenue to avoid or to get reparations for the distress that they've been going through in some workplaces historically. Some men see it as an avenue for retroactive punishment to be meted out to them for an encounter with a lady that didn't go right. And so I put it back on the table to you. A man believes that this thing is here to punish me, and a woman may see it as an avenue to punish the man who did not do right by me. And I'm asking the legislation, as it balances justice for the accused and the accuser, if you are confident that it is crafted in such a way to give justice on both sides of the scale. Let me ask the question that way.
I think, yes, George. I honestly believe, having been associated with this legislation from its inception, from its changes over the last 3 years of the work that has gone into it. One, I like the simplicity of the wording of this legislation. This is not difficult. This is not a hard task. I like the fact that it puts in place enough stops and balances, checks and balances, that you, in crafting it in your workplace, depending on how large your institution is, you can make it possible for people to have redress at different levels. Most people will not be looking to get financial compensation or legal penalties. Most people want respect. What most people want is to go to work, do their work, enjoy their work, and not suffer at someone else's interest in a non-consensual way. And I think this is a message that we have to bring home, whatever the size of the institution, that it is fair practice for someone to be able to earn an income without being put in a position where they have to rebuff you. That if you are interested sexually in someone, there's a place for that too. And even then, people can refuse you. So I think we have to begin to treat each other with mutual respect. And let me be very clear. I am a little uncomfortable with the examples that say, if a woman. Can we say if a person? It doesn't matter whether it's a woman or a man, despite the fact that women suffer at the hands of this more. But allow me.
Yes.
I also want us to remember that this power differential that we speak about is not always a man being in power and a woman being supervised by a man. There is also reverse power as well, where people who are employed offer favors to employers in order to get other benefits, a quid pro quo.
Yes.
This is also sexual harassment. So I think this piece of legislation has taken into account many aspects of human interaction. And I'm pleased to see that we're moving towards a psychojudicial approach and looking at human interaction,
yes,
not just a law for the sake of a law.
Yes, well, Dr. Carpenter, in defense of my example, we don't have all the time in the world, and I had to base my example on the traditional power dynamic.
But so, I do want to emphasize that.
Excuse me there. When you say your smaller members need some more time, just how much more time do they need, and what can the JEF do in that period to help them to get on the pony in time?
In my recollection, I believe we asked for 3 months. The plan is to put together some sample policies that are appropriate to different sectors in the small and medium size, up to small and medium sizes. So if you are running a garage, a motor garage that has 30 workers, we will have something for you. You start in your name, you read it over, but we're not going to stop there. We might give that away for free, but we have to train. We have to train people. You know, you don't want it to be something in a frame on a shelf or something in a file that when the inspector comes, you can show them and it's business as usual after. There's a wider conversation and an important conversation that we have to have nationally. And as I say, it's not just about businesses that are thinking about the bottom line. It's about institutions. How do boys and girls interact in school, starting at the primary level? I know that there are some people who are shy to talk about these issues. And there are some people who do not necessarily subscribe to the values. Let us be blunt. There are things in the Act that do not align with many people's thinking in the society.
Correct.
But it's an important conversation to have if we're going to shift that.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you that I really appreciate your time this evening. There's time enough for me to say that, look, this issue is not one of the sexy topics that come up on the agenda from time to time. It is not one that will get a lot of people to click and like and share. I don't mind, because there are heavy issues, important issues that must be given proper journalistic treatment with people who can contribute to the issue. And I feel that this evening is one of those, because sexual harassment, the toll it takes on morale. Wayne Chen mentioned the M word, morale in the workplace. Karen Carpenter spoke about the respect and individual feeling, as if their contribution as an individual